Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight. My name is Katie Woods. I am a library assistant at the Pacifica Sharp Park Library, as well as a writer. I'm excited to be here tonight to welcome Jaime Cortez, the author of Gordo. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that the virtual author talk series will be taking a short pause in December, but then in January, on January 23rd, we will be joined by Nina Schuler, author of Afterward. So stay tuned for more information about that, and be sure to be on the lookout for more in-person author events as well popping up around the San Mateo County Libraries. As for tonight's logistics, your microphone and video will be turned off, but please feel free to use the chat and submit your questions in the Zoom Q&A. For those who'd like to access live closed captions for this event, click on CC and then show subtitle. And now San Mateo County Libraries is thrilled to welcome Jaime Cortez. Jaime Cortez is a writer and visual artist based in Watsonville, California, and the San Francisco Bay Area. His fiction, essays, and drawings have appeared in diverse publications that include Kindergarten, Experimental Writing for Children, No Straight Lines, a 40-year compendium of LGBT comics, Street Art San Francisco, and Infinite City, an experiment atlas of San Francisco. He wrote and illustrated the graphic novel Sexile for AIDS Project Los Angeles in 2003. And his first short story collection, Gordo, was published, was published in 2021 by Black Cat, an imprint of Grove Atlantic Press. Gordo received national acclaim from reviewers at the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The book was nominated for the Carnegie Medal of Excellence in Fiction and the Lambda Literary Award, and was named a Best Book of the Year by National Public Radio and Book Page. Cortez received his BA from the University of Pennsylvania and his MFA in Visual Art from UC Berkeley. And his website is jaimecortez.org. So be sure to visit that to keep abreast of new things that will be coming from Jaime Cortez. Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here and welcome. I believe that we are going to be treated to a short reading to begin the evening before we jump into some questions from me, and then of course questions from our audience and participants here. We really would love to hear any questions that you have about this wonderful book. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the welcome. It's such a pleasure to be participating in this event. You know, growing up, I was a library kid. It was just my favorite place to be. My mother used to take us to the library regularly when we were little kids, and it's a habit I never outgrew, and it's always a delight for me to be amongst the books.
Always a delight for me to hear libraries praised too.
Yes, love them. So thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you this evening. I'm Jaime Cortez, the author of Gordo. I'm going to start out with just doing a little reading, and it'll be brief, and it's just designed to kind of give you a sense of the voice I hear when I'm writing in the first person voice of that little kid character, Gordo, which is basically me as a kid growing up. I'm going to be reading from one of the stories in the book called Fandango. And in this story, Gordo is living in a migrant farm worker camp. It's summertime. And in the summer, Fridays nights and Saturday nights are the big drinking nights for the men. And Gordo decides that he's going to join in and just kind of be present for this drinking party, which is probably not an appropriate thing for a little boy to be wanting to do, but he wanted to do this. And so there he is in this situation. And here he's talking about like this occurrence that happens, and then that fascinates him, this gathering of these men for the drinking party. You'll excuse me if I start coughing. I've been having a tickle in my throat all day. So I'll just go ahead and begin with a little brief reading to let you hear the voice. This is told in the voice of Gordo, the little boy. The Saturday night drinking fandango happens all summer when the garlic and tomato harvests are happening. After dinner, the men bring broken branches and scraps of wood to the tractor barn to start a fire. It's not even cold in the summer. I think they just like making fires. Once the fire gets going, the guys bring chairs from their kitchens. Blue chairs, orange chairs, new chairs, ripped chairs. My pa had a big green easy chair that lives in the tractor barn under a big blue plastic sheet. Pa's chair looks like it got into a long fight with some bears. It has long ribs in it, and you could see the dirty cotton sticking out. It has one broken leg, so it's kind of wobbly, but that ugly chair is my pa's throne. He loves it, and nobody else gets to sit there. When Bob goes to get his big chair, he rips off the plastic with both hands like a magician uncovering a pretty girl. Then he drags his chair out into the circle and he always parks it in the same spot with his back to the wall facing the entrance. My tío Hector brings his little red record player and albums. He plugs the player into a long extension cord connected to another long extension cord, and that goes into his kitchen window. My tío always carries in his stack of records, but to be honest, he only needs to bring one because most of the night they play one thing again and again. Vicente Fernandez. Oh my God, it's always and forever Vicente. Vicente shouting out the gritos. Ay, ay, ay. Vicente is the king of the drunk guys who are only happy when they're sad. When all the chairs are out and the record player's plugged in, they need one more thing, the most important thing, beer. Everybody brings beer. Six packs, tall boys, cases, big brown bottles like the hobos drink by the train tracks. Olympia, Hams, Lone Star, Schlitz, and especially Coors. When one of the guys travels to Mexico, he always comes back with big old honking bottles of Tecate or Estrella. They call the big Mexican beers caguamas, and everybody gets super excited and they pass the bottles around. The caguamas are special. I could tell because when they drink them, they close their eyes and they look so happy, like hungry babies with baby bottles. They go, ah, like Tecate comes from heaven instead of dusty old Mexico. Tonight, I decide to hang out with the men while they drink. Most of the other boys in the camp don't like to. When I told my sister Sylvia I was going to the fandango, she asked, "Why are you going to hang out with those drunks? They're dangerous." "Because I want to." "That's a bad idea, bozo, but go ahead. You get what you get." I grab a bucket, flip it upside down, and that's my throne. I sit outside of the circle, almost in the dark. I stay quiet. It's nice, like being invisible. When I try to stay for the fandango, Pa usually tells me to get out, but sometimes he lets me stay. Tonight, he lets me stay. Probably I shouldn't stay. Bad things happen at the fandango. Not every time, but a lot of the time. Some drunks are happy, some are sleepy, some are sad, some like to sing, some are angry. They're like the seven dwarfs. Everybody's different. The problem is that some of the guys get mean or they just need to fight. When they fight, it's really exciting, but kind of scary, like when you're watching Godzilla fighting a big monster and they're knocking down buildings, stomping on buses, throwing around tanks. It makes you want to run like the people in Tokyo trying to get away from the monsters. Drunk guys are scary. And to be honest, I think guys are kind of scary even when they're not drunk, including my ba. So that's just a little kind of taste of that narrator first person voice.
Wonderful. There's so many things that come up in that short reading and that short segment that touch on like so many of the questions I want to ask. So that was great to hear. And I just love that earnest little kid voice, that like observant, but the immediate, the like urgency that he's like pushing out words, or you're pushing out words as him, you know? I don't know. It's very, very great. Very it's hard not to be charmed by Gordo on the page and in the reading as well. Oh man, okay. Now I'm like, which question will I start with after so many of them feel sparked by that passage? Okay, I guess I'll start here. So you have referred in different interviews to these stories as autobiographical, and here tonight too, you mentioned you feel like this little kid is basically you as a little kid. Yeah, what does that sort of idea of semi-autobiographical or writing something that is given to us as fiction, but like is based on your parts of your own past.
Yeah, if I had to attach numbers to it, I'd say that these stories kind of in total are somewhere between 75 and 90% based on real things that I remember.
Mhm.
But I also wanted to give myself uh, room for invention and
Mhm.
room to cobble together elements from other stories and other ideas into actual lived memory. Um, and so that's why I think of it as, a semi-autobiographical work of fiction, though I would say semi probably doesn't do justice to just how much of it is based on real occurrences.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. I I realized after a while that sticking with only what I remembered to be true could be really powerful in its own way, and it is. But I like having that room to create and to invent and to cobble together other ideas as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And to cobble them together, maybe with like leaving room to feel like you're like honoring everyone you're writing about too and not putting, yeah. So I've been really loving reading a lot of books recently that are in sort of this style. Like if anyone out there is interested, like two that come to mind are Eve Babbitt's Slow Days, Fast Company somehow is fiction, but it feels like not fiction. Or
Mm.
100 Boyfriends by Brontez Purnell is a book I've loved recently that, is fiction, but
Oh yeah, I know
that,
Brontez. He's hilarious.
oh my God, that book is just, it's, yeah, it's wonderful. I love, anyway, I'm so interested in what the process is or the mindset or kind of how natural this came to you or how much you refine this as you were refining the book of looking back at your own real memories and writing them in this, for the most part, writing them in this first person child's voice and so delicately sprinkling in your adult observations without betraying that child's voice. How difficult was that on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 to 10.
That's a good question. I think that, in retrospect, I realized that the hardest work and the one where I really had to kind of elevate my craft was in trying to nail that kid voice
Mhm.
and just figuring out how to evacuate my adult self out of
Mhm.
that kid. My adult way of thinking and my adult vocabulary and way of speaking needed to get eliminated from there.
Mhm.
And that was the work, is trying to remember what it was like to think like a kid,
Mhm.
to try to remember um, what it was like to have that vocabulary with which to make sense of the world.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested in the poetics of kids. When you
Mhm.
have this kind of limited kind of kid vocabulary, how do you use that to kind of be very expressive with it? Because of course, little kids are incredibly expressive. They're natural poets, so many of them, and they do it with their own kind of kid vocabulary. And it's a capturing that was the great kind of craft challenge of the book to
Yeah,
get that voice.
I can only imagine it it must be. And that there are so many moments where I, as a reader, like feel how Gordo is making meaning from what he's taking in, but that there's the way it's on the page still allows me to know that this book, that the voice, like really directing the whole book, the whole project, like has made some other meaning for us to take from it, like things about masculinity specifically. I'm thinking about. I have more questions about that. So it's just so I just love the balance of that here. I'm so impressed by it as a writer who really struggles with sort of autofiction-y things. And yeah, I think it's a marvelous achievement. So it's just, yeah, I become inarticulate about that because I love thinking about how we form a consciousness and then having to go back sort of backwards into a consciousness that you don't live in anymore to write that is pretty cool. Um, so let's see. There is, and it is cool too that you have this story, the Nasty Book Wars, which feels different. A little gets to be a little bit of a departure. It's like what the fifth story in the book, And that one actually starts in the past tense. That one has a different voice from the opening. You are able to name a year, name a setting, like clearly it begins from a further away voice, but then we gradually go back to the children and to the sort of squabbles and arguments of children in that story as well. What made you, was it a conscious decision of like you wanted one or two that were able to sort of place the book very specifically in time, or like where you felt like that should happen in the collection?
I think there's a couple of things that happen with that. And yes, the book starts out with very kind of decisively in the voice of this kid, and then abruptly you have an adult, sophisticated narrator, not a naive kid talking, but an adult who perceives things in adult ways. There's a couple of things at play there. One of them was that in working with my editor, John Freeman, I had sent to him a stack of short stories, and he was very interested in having showing the different kind of registers and the different kind of voice I can work in. So he was very encouraging of having a batch of stories in the middle of the book that would suddenly take you out of that first person kid voice into a more adult voice. And I thought about it for a while, and I told him, we could just use all the stories that are in that kid voice, and I could certainly write some more. And he was very set that it was actually a good approach, and he convinced me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that's how we ended up having in the middle of the book a whole different kind of voice for a spell. And it was kind of fun to first be deeply immersed in that kid's perspective, and then suddenly have this omniscient narrator that's kind of looking down upon, not in a negative way, but just looking and
Mm-hmm.
looking at this kid and his world from an adult perspective. So I actually found that to be kind of a fun shift of perspective. So yeah.
Yeah. It I think another effect it had for me in reading was that that story in particular, um, it moves from a description of someone who works on the farm who's kind of made fun of and who gets another marvelous nickname as people get throughout the book. And then after he's sort of a character who seems like beloved, but a little bit of a clown, this character opening in the story, um, the last time we see this character is he's being taken away by like immigration agents all of a sudden. And then the story moves into the kids going all through his belongings that were left over and finding like these dirty books and becoming kid voice squabbly, still in not quite kid voice, but so it not only moved in the voice, but moved in almost like the concerns, like these very adult concerns, to then more, even though the books are adult books, the way the kids are warring over them is very childlike.
Yeah.
And that's a balance that you're striking like throughout the book, these things that are like adult concerns, huge, like adult problems, the world's pains, and then children being silly children.
Yeah.
Um,
I was very interested in like really communicating something. And I think that people kind of in my age, people in their 50s and older, can probably relate to a lot of this, is the idea of talking about kids who do not have a thick protective bubble surrounding their lives.
mhm,
So the membrane between these kids and the harshness of life is as thin as like a soap bubble.
mhm,
And so they are not protected from these realities of violence, of seeing someone get deported,
mhm,
um, and then they suddenly disappear and they're not in your life anymore. It's a kind of death almost,
mhm,
and there's no protection from that. It's just part of their life, and they have to figure out like what that means for them. In this case, they might the scene where Brimi is captured and deported, it has a pathos to it. It also has humor in it.
Because he is holding a beer as he runs
And
away,
he's
Victoria.
holding beer, and he never lets go, even when he falls. So there's that element of it, like the tragic comedy of it.
Mhm,
Um, and these kids quickly move into a whole different thing of like, okay, we want to root around in his bedroom to see what we can find. And they find a stash of porn.
Mm-hmm.
And from that ensues this great epic kid battle over ownership of the stash of porn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just that sense. And in some ways, like you think about it, again, they're not protected from this sexual imagery that was in the porn magazines. They find it and they take control of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was interested in kids who were kind of feral,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm
which is
thinking,
I think something that a lot of people, again, my age and older, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s can relate to, like what it meant to grow up kind of feral, and the glories of that and the perils of that, right?
yeah, and kids who are, there's such an interesting tension throughout between the ways that the kids are taking in all of the information of their world and also how their selves are like there's some kind of internal self or is aligning with that or like opposed to that. So I'm thinking, talking about these kids not being protected, I'm thinking about the story about Cookie and Cookie who has this gift for art and like knows how to draw. Yeah, Cookie's her name, right? That's right.
Yes.
And then there was this really striking moment for me towards the end of that story where we hear Cookie's mother, who has like gotten in horrible fights with her, like they have been physically violent to each other. And Cookie talks to the kids and is like, I'm gonna leave town, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Like there something, I'm gonna paraphrase this. So it's like something like there's a bigger, better world out there for me. And then two
I got a
pages
big
later,
life to live.
thank you, I've got a big life to live.
I got a
And
big
then
life to live.
you got a big life to live. And then 2 pages later, her mother says, I've got a big life to live. So we see, oh, that like you've inverted the echo, but we understand where that message, that particular phrase comes from. It's passed on from mother to daughter, just as so much else is in that story, like destructive relationships with men, but what's not passed on, what Cookie seems to have like uniquely is this gift for art that isn't like encouraged. And we don't, so I was interested in these stories that link so much thematically that I find myself wanting to talk about one story and then like jumping into another. But I'm interested, and that's just an example of something that's continuously happening for Gordo, right? Our narrator, especially around masculinity and sexuality, being given information, trying to understand, do I fit this or not? What were your concerns or hopes for what you were trying to communicate about um, this young character's development of his sense of maybe, I know they're big questions, like just put together like masculinity and then queer identity.
Yeah, and I want to touch on both of those characters briefly. Fat Cookie,
Mm-hmm.
um, she is a mean, traumatized kid,
Mm-hmm.
and she's also an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And it was her character for me is special because her character is the way I talk about how by having a creative inner life, that is how you can begin imagining something better for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is through that act of creativity. And so Cookie talks about, I got a big life to live. One day I'm going to get out of this camp. Um, and she has, this creative life. She has inside of her this capacity to imagine something more, something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So she can make a beautiful drawing. She could do a beautiful dance. So we see her do both of those things. And both of those moments were transcendent moments where this kid on this farm worker camp became an artist in those moments. And it was a kind of a transcendence thing. So that's why Cookies has a spot in my heart, because she represents that thing, which was so important for me as a kid growing up when I discovered first drawing. That was my first love. And I would just disappear into the drawing process and I would go somewhere else. And it was important for me as a way of imagining another life for myself, and accessing that. And Gordo is in an interesting life stage in these stories because he's like maybe 9, 10 years old, and this is in the 70s, and he has he's a gay kid, and he's beginning to have these feelings, but he has no framework or vocabulary for it. beyond knowing that there's something terribly wrong with him, and there's something terribly wrong with being different in this way, and that his gender expression, being a soft boy, being what would be called a sissy, uh, was a problem, and it's actually a peril. It gets him in trouble, and when men see that, they are hostile to him in different ways because of that. And so I'm interested in that phase where he knows something is quote wrong, and he knows that it elicits hostility, and it has something to do with not being a real boy.
Mhm.
Um, and that's the framework that he has. He doesn't have the benefit of all of this understanding that a certain percentage of the population is just gay, um, and that it doesn't have to be a problem. So that's the kind of moment that I was trying to get at. That moment in his development, but
Mhm.
also that kind of cultural moment of the 70s in a rural setting, and what kind of information you don't have access to understand your own situation.
Yeah. So he and we as readers can see where, though he doesn't have the language for what he's like recognizing in others, how he is defining himself like against others or as seeing people he might be more similar to in a way he doesn't understand yet as well. Like that he has that heartbreaking line of it's not a good idea to be different after understanding that his neighbor Alex, who um he thought was he always just called a man, was assigned female at birth and maybe identified or lived as a man. The language would be different now from the time of
Yes.
him talking too. But he equates that discovery immediately with his own difference too, right? It's
Yeah.
not just this person is different. Of course, that story goes in many other directions with that idea of
Yeah.
the character of Alex, and even uh, the thinking again about the question of like what masculinity means or what it seems to mean throughout these stories too. So yeah, I guess so. I have a question that'll lead into the next question. One of the things that it seems that Gordo continuously learns about a better way to be masculine is not just to be hard, but to be like violent, to fight, right? Literally, when his dad is trying to turn him and toughen him up, he gets him a wrestling outfit, and of course, Gordo is just really excited about the beautiful boots and the jump rope to sing his jump rope song, which is so lovely. But then he's congratulated for having like a pretty brutal fight with a friend. Um, I'm wondering what you were thinking of, or how much it was important to you to explore the link between a sort of insistent masculinity, not like inherent, so insistent masculinity and violence.
Excuse me. Um, Throughout the book, the specter of violence, the possibility of violence hovers over a lot of the stories. And it can be minor violence and it can be major and devastating violence, but it's pretty present throughout that possibility of different kinds of violence.
Mhm.
Um, and I think Gordo is, receptive enough to know that it's just under the surface of things that something could become violent. And he's trying to figure out how to navigate that and how to stay safe,
Mhm.
um, physically and also just psychically, how to stay safe when that threat is omnipresent. Um, in his case, the violence is something that kind of can plague him because he's a little kid, and because he's a boy who is not a hard boy. He's a soft boy. He's a sissy boy. So that makes him, a target of violence. But really, it's all around.
Mhm.
Grown women and grown men are also like just an inch away from violence at any given moment in the book. So no one gets away. No one reaches escape velocity from the possibility of violence. And I was kind of interested in getting at that.
Yeah. I mean, we see that too in the tackling of preemie, right? They're in the story about Alex, her girlfriend describes the potential murder of her brothers by the government in El Salvador. So there's also continuously this sort of like state sanctioned violence as well as, and I wonder if that felt important to you to have
That
that
was
there also.
significant for me, mainly because I wanted, that character was based on a real person. There was a couple next door, and the woman, in that couple, who is called Delia in the book. Delia was from El Salvador, and she was escaping the violence of that kind of early Civil War era in El Salvador. And I often, as an adult, when I was thinking back and putting together the timeline and realized, oh, she was fleeing that early period of a civil war and trying to escape that violence, and she stepped into an abusive and violent partnership
Mhm.
relationship. And I was just thinking about the kind of bitter, cruel irony of that the refuge became a violent place as well. Turned
Yeah.
out to be a violent place as well. So yeah, that was what I was interested in. The book does not make it's one of the few places in the book where I make clear reference
Mm.
to outside kind of
Yeah.
political things that are happening. Um, but it felt significant to me in this particular case.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't feel like it is the focus of the book, but it feels like an important extra layer to have there. Um, Also now when I've been talking about this book with other people and describing like to a coworker saying, oh, I just wrote, a question about wanting to talk about violence and then different forms of violence. I was like, but the book's very funny. And she was like, looked at me like aghast. I was like, no, it's like, uh, so I keep also insisting how funny the book is, right? Like the moments of sort of lightheartedness that are here that feel very real, don't feel they come from the absurdity of life, of living, right? But also I noticed that in your dedication, that you dedicated to, I believe, your parents, and that you say you gave that thanking them for an extended master course in gallows humor. Can you talk a little bit about gallows humor and why that was
I
important to
think
have in
that
this book?
um in the midst of all the kind of hardship that I saw growing up, affecting me directly, but also affecting people around me. The alcohol, the violence, the economic instability, the citizenship kind of instability, all of that stuff, being documented or not. Um, in the midst of all of that, it was so funny. There was so much humor, and I don't ever want to lose track of the fact that those things coexisted.
Mhm.
The horrors of what people were enduring existed right alongside that resilient ability to summon laughter. And so it's a tribute to the resilience of those people I grew up with. And this is something that was very, very common all around me in all of these families. And I know that it's something that's very true cross-culturally. People going through great hardships have to dig deep and summon that humor, that ability to laugh again, because sometimes that's the only thing you got to protect you in that moment when things feel really desperate, is to just laugh, even if it's to laugh at the hopelessness of the situation. Just to find that is so important, and I'm very moved by that, because I know that that laughter has all of this other stuff underneath it. All of that pain and the fear is all there too, but it doesn't negate the laughter. It's still there. So yeah, I'm a student of humor. I think about humor a lot, and I study how it plays out in different formats and different cultural kind of contexts, and it's something that endlessly fascinates me. And I think a lot about the function of humor, and the ways in which, in some ways, it is universal, and the other ways in which humor can be very culturally specific, very class specific, very
Mhm.
language specific. So yeah, I'm fascinated by humor.
Yeah. Even like within families, there can be a whole language of humor just in one familial set, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, because you have that shared history, And there might be a little phrase from something someone said 10 years ago, and it gets abbreviated, and all you have to do is say that one word, and it invokes a whole story that you share together, right? So yeah, that's a very intimate humor.
Yeah. Makes me think that humor overall has sort of a generosity to it as well, and a connection of curiosity about others. What was I'm interested in, I always find writing things that are funny can be very difficult, or writing with maybe even the intention that there will be humor in something. Did you sit down with the intention of, I'm going to write stories that are also humorous, or is that natural from just recording the stories you were recording, in the way you see the world?
If I want to communicate how we lived, I have to communicate the fact that there was always humor.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to do that. The challenge is, how do you make it work? Because
Mm-hmm.
humor is tricky. And that's the challenge. But yes, I cannot tell the truth unless I'm talking about the humor.
Yeah. Like having such an earnest narrator also helps, right? Because sometimes we're laughing with him. We're never laughing really at him, but sometimes humor comes from how very serious he is about, how delicious a donut is, or something like that, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I have lots of other questions, but we do have some questions coming in from the other wonderful people who are here, we cannot
Sure.
see, but who are hanging out with us. And I would love to fold some of them in, and to keep encouraging everyone else here to ask any questions that are coming to mind. Um, First, we have, beautiful to hear your book voice, Jaime. The visuals of the rip-torn chairs and the beer gods are quite powerful in my mind's eye. I'm wondering, has your family read your Gordo stories? And how are your stories received by family members? Thank you.
The kid characters in this book were very much inspired by my aunts and uncles who were my age, basically. And we grew up almost as siblings. I would never think to call them Aunt Manuela or Uncle Joe. They're basically peers. So so
Yeah.
we're almost more like siblings. And they are the basis of those kid characters, my sisters and my aunts and uncles. And they were so tickled, and when they read the book, and they said, "Oh, am I tiny?" Yes, you are tiny. Yes, you're the basis of tiny. So they were very tickled. I think it's just something like, there's something kind of very poignant about, like, somebody cared. Somebody cared that we lived this life and that we had stories, and someone cared and elevated them to share them. And I think that that's very moving. And I think that the other part of it, which is more complex, is that my mother and father both passed away before the book was published. And I have to say that in some ways, their having passed away, in 2013 and 2014, I already had a bunch of the stories written by that point. But the book was not even a glimmer of a possibility yet at that point. But the fact that they were no longer here in this world living meant that I did not have to go through the process of navigating sharing our family stories this way, because really it's my mother and father who I think are most kind of exposed in these stories. Aside from myself, I try to be very vulnerable myself, my kid self, but they are very exposed. Their parenting is up for consideration, up for examination, up for judgment, in these stories. And so I didn't have to go through that experience of, running it past them. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done if they told me, I don't want this. This is not accurate. This is not how I want you to portray me in the world. I don't know what I would have done with that, but probably I would not have gone forward if I felt like they felt it was a dishonoring. It's just not worth it to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to deal with that because of that's what the circumstances were. Those of you who are watching today, who are writing and thinking about telling family stories, you will need to navigate these very questions about consent, and is it consent beforehand, consent afterwards? Does it matter to you if they end up feeling like it's inaccurate or dishonoring them, does that matter, or are you just more focused on trying to tell your truth? You have to make all those ethical choices when you're telling family stories.
Yeah, there. Sorry, there's something about the phrasing of "up for consideration" was was funny to me. This is making me think of uh Dorothy Allison talked and wrote a lot about writing from truth. Also a semi-autobiographical novel, Bastard of Carolina, or she talked about how.
Um,
Hmm?
I just want to say that that's when people ask me what my biggest influences were, she's always in that constellation of five writers who completely rock my world. And
Yeah,
Bastard Out of Carolina absolutely rocked my world.
it's an incredible piece of art. One of my
Staggering.
yeah, people can describe it as like your jewels on your necklace, like your five writers you would wear like around your
Well,
around your necklace. I was lucky enough to not I didn't ever work with her directly, but just be in her presence at Tin House Writers Conference and just hear her read, and just have to try as a little tiny baby student, like read, seeing her watching all the readers from the top of the hill with her imposing brilliance. She would say, anyway, yeah, if anyone out there, if you don't know Dorothy Allison, pick up that book. Just find a YouTube video of her talking. She's incredible. She talks a lot about how you can use your treasure, the things that have happened to you in your life, and use them as for your story, but also that if you portray someone in a really raw, honest way, you have the duty to do that for yourself as well. You should never be the good guy of a story that is
yeah,
autobiographical. Yeah.
that's
Um,
something as well too that was important for me was like um in working on these stories, I love these characters because I love who they're based on. And I'm not interested in any of them being villains, even when they're being awful and hurting other people. I'm not interested in villains, nor am I interested in heroes. I don't need either of those tropes. What I'm interested in is kind of more the fullness of them, because we all have that in us. We all have a certain level of awfulness in us, hurtfulness in us, and we have a nobility in us. Everybody. So
I think that there's a lot of love in the writing around your parents here too. So one would hope
I hope
they would,
so.
if they had seen the book, that they would have seen that too.
I hope
I could read it in it. Yeah, there. Um, okay, now we're getting a lot of questions. This is very exciting. Okay, from the audience. You have a vivid imagination, which you must have had even more so as a child. Do you think your imagination has expanded with age or decreased?
it's kind of an interesting thing. In some ways, in writing these stories, it was about reporting what I remember happened. And so the act of imagination was not that profound for this. But when I'm drawing or when I'm writing doing a comic book, then I deploy the full imagination because I don't feel like I'm obliged um, to stick to the autobiographical so closely. And do I feel like it's increased or diminished? I would have to say that it has probably diminished, but it's also there's a deepening that's also
Mm,
happened simultaneously. So I don't necessarily have the same kind of flights of imagination that I used to, but I think I can, when I imagine things, I can go much deeper with it than I used to be able to.
yeah, that
So,
makes a lot
so
of sense.
I think my wings are not what they used to be, but my shovel is better than ever.
I love that. My wings are not what they used to be, but my shovel is better than ever. It's a great phrase. Um, okay. We're getting so many questions. I want to make sure we think to them. In a virtual author event with Christopher Rivas, I asked him what brown enough means for the next generation. My daughter promptly showed up in the Zoom with your book and loved the Jesus Donut short story. Latino Hispanic stories were not readily accessible when I was growing up in the 90s, and I'm curious what additional stories you want to share. So yeah, maybe writers or books or artists that we should be looking at.
Yeah, like right now I'm reading the Colombian American writer Ingrid Rojas Contreras's book, The Man Who Could Move Clouds,
Mhm.
which was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. And it's a magnificent book, and I'm about a third of the way through. And it's about a family, three generations of a family, all of whom have a gift of kind of let's just call it magic, that they are in touch with the paranormal.
Mhm.
Um, and it's complicated, and she kind of describes what it means, and they function as healers and as seers in their communities. Um, and it's a beautiful read so far, and I'm just and yes, she is a Bay Area writer, teaches at the University of San Francisco, and she's a real Bay Area treasure. Um, and so that's something that has been so that's something that's been really kind of rocking me right now, and I'm totally enjoying that. I think historically as well, the short stories of Junot Diaz, the Dominican American writer, really had a huge impact on me. His sense of milieu and voice was is gorgeous. Um, and let's see who else among the, and I'm trying to remember his name. He just received the MacArthur Award, and his book Zigzagger was a beautiful story about a queer gay men in California Central Valley farm towns, and I thought it was a lovely book. So those are some people who, and I'm forgetting names. I'm
Is that
terrible.
Manuel Munoz? Munoz? Is
Yes,
that
that's
right?
Manuel Munoz. Yeah, that sounds right.
Awesome. Let me find I'll link people to a little blurb from the MacArthur Foundation. You're also reminding me of the book Fibre Tropical, which
Oh
was
yeah,
another
Juliana Lopera.
queer
Yeah.
story. Also on like a smaller press too.
Yes, and Juliana is another Bay Area writer,
Feminist press, that's right. Yeah.
and they came out of the gate very strong with their book, so it was great.
And that's
Yeah.
another kind of coming of age story as well. So if you're very interested in coming of age stories, that might be a good read.
Excuse me.
Um, if you, okay, here's another question. I wonder if you had a specific audience in mind, or were you most intent on telling your story authentically?
Um, I think I was most intent on trying to be as authentic as I could be in telling the story. Um, Audience is such an interesting and strange thing to me in so many ways. It's a question that often just kind of stops me in my tracks.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I was writing it, when people started asking me about audience, I thought, well, I don't know, but um, I imagine that people whose life experiences maybe mirrored or echoed mine in some way. But now that the book's been out for a couple of years, I see that the audience is much broader than that, and I underestimated how much a book can be an empathy machine
Mhm.
that really helps us connect to experiences outside of our own. I didn't realize just how much that could happen, and it's been very heartening and encouraging that people from so many different backgrounds find connection here. Just get nice fan mail, and she'll be like, "Hi, I'm a 65-year-old white woman from Arkansas. I grew up rural, and I feel like I know these characters because there's so much like my family." And that was just like went right to my heart. It was just such a beautiful thing to hear. And yeah, yeah.
Yep. I meant to even in the opening tonight congratulate you on the success of this book and that it's a book on a small indie press or a smaller press, you could say. But I feel like it's had really long legs. Like it's continuously in discussion, which must be so exciting and heartening. I don't know, like that maybe not maybe I don't know enough about like the actual world of having your book out there for a long time, or not a long time, but like I feel like it just is continuously beloved. Like love has only increased for it, and I've seen it praised so many places. So that must be so wonderful.
That's very nice to hear. You know, as a debut author, this is my first kind of. I've edited a book before, but and I've done my graphic novel, which was distributed as a public health tool through public health channels, um, and that's very different from having a book of my work, just my work published by a press. So I have nothing to compare it to, but it's I have been so heartened and encouraged by the response to it, including the fact that a couple of years out, it feels like it's still kind of alive and it's still circulating. And I, you know, just this fall, I'll probably have done a dozen, you know, book events. When I do when I count it all up, like something like around a dozen. Um, and I wouldn't have expected that, you know, a couple years out from publishing. Um, and it makes me feel encouraged because at the end of this year, I'm going to be moving on from my day job and focusing for a couple of months on just writing the next one.
Awesome. That flows beautifully into the next question, one of the scariest questions any artist or author can hear. When can we expect another book soon?
Well, I'm hoping to be doing a lot of writing in 2024, and um, I don't have a contract for a second book. However, um, I think that once I write it, because the first one did pretty well, it should be a good door opener. And I have a very good agent and who I think will be able to get my work out in front of publishers' eyes for consideration. So fingers crossed that I'll write this in 2024 and maybe sometime in 25 it'll get published if things go beautifully. But you never know. I certainly don't know for sure.
Well, I'll be excited to be on the lookout, and especially because I know you do so much other art and you're, a busy person. Congratulations on leaving your day job into full-time artist.
Thank you. Complicated, difficult choice, but probably it's going to be a good choice.
The person who asked that question, I should say too, said, by the way, this retired kindergarten teacher loves the authentic kid voices. So not,
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a really interesting question. You can decide how much you want to answer it. Obviously, you can decide. I don't have to tell you that. For the kids who are based on real characters, how are many of them doing now? Curious how many of them are doing now.
Most of them are, I would say, thriving
Mm-hmm.
and doing well. One of the things with me and my sisters and my uncles and aunts is that as kind of as in many ways challenging our kids' lives were, we also had a strong sense of family connection. And we also were infused with a relentless work ethic. You know, my mom and dad were absolute workhorses. My grandparents were as well. And we were raised to have a very strong work ethic. And I think it's a complicated thing to have this work ethic where it's shameful to rest. You know, that's the negative side of it, like resting is shameful.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side of it is that you know how to work and you take it for you take it for granted that hard work is your lot, no matter what you're doing. And so we have been able to parlay that, I think, into thriving. And we have had, I guess, in many ways, the American dream was realized. We have, we are first generation Americans, and we have experienced class ascendance for whatever that's worth. And it is worth it. It does matter. I look at my nieces and nephews and I think, wow, they are middle class American kids. They have their own laptops, they have their own bedrooms. It's not strange for them to imagine a family vacation. You know, just all of these things that we could not have fathomed, just having your own bedroom, having your own equipment. And so it happened. Yeah. And others on whom these stories are based, um, I think for some people that kind of hard life catches up with them, and there's alcohol issues still for quite a few of the people who these characters are based on, um, and all that comes with the alcohol, the health effects, the way it breaks apart lives and families and hurts people, all of that's very real.
Mhm. I think we're almost at the very end here. I wanted to throw in one more question, just as it also has some nice words for you in it. So this person says, oh, actually, okay, someone else just pinged up to like basically echo this praise. So two people have said a similar thing. This person says, thank you for Raimundo. May all Raimundos live on and grow with such resilience. How did you capture the brutality and balance with the hope Raimundo carries with him? I loved him wearing his mom's belt and challenging the bullies with his truth.
Um, I think that that was based on a real person. In my town growing up, when I was about that age, when we moved to Watsonville, I was in the third grade. Um, and we had, I guess we would have to call him the town fruit.
Mhm.
And it was the gay guy who was patently and unmistakably gay. And everybody in town knew who he was.
Mhm.
Everybody knew what he was about. You know, he wore his hair down to his waist and he wore earrings, which, you know, in a farm town in the 70s, that's just like bold and gutsy, gutsy. I was fascinated and terrified by this person.
Mhm.
I was fascinated that someone could just be so different and keep their head up, despite the kind of verbal and physical abuse that they had experienced. I was fascinated by that, and I was terrified that someone could be so different and so seemingly outside of everything. Like, where did this person fit in? They were an army of one, you know. Um, and thinking about that person, thinking about the incredible courage of just showing up every day as yourself, in a circumstance where there's not a lot of reinforcement and support and love for that. It was a study in courage.
Mhm. Mhm. And that moment of recognizing a, a a way to live as yourself for the Gordo character. It reminds me of the moment in Fun Home when the young Alison Bechdel character like recognizes like a butch woman somewhere. She's like, that can exist.
I
I can
love
do
Fun
that.
Home. It's
Yeah.
such a beautiful graphic novel. It's so good.
I
So
love the
good.
graphic novel and I love the musical and I love the short comic Alison Bechdel wrote about the musical, like about watching the musical too. It's so great. Yeah. Um, Well, I think we're about at the end. There were a few more questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all. Thank you all so much for your enthusiasm and participation and your enthusiasm for this wonderful book. And of course, thank you, Jaime, for writing this wonderful book and sharing these characters with us. And I laughed out loud multiple times reading this, which is always a great delight for me reading. It, the people in it feel as real, as they were based on, but they feel they're so alive on the page, and it's a really wonderful accomplishment. Um, and then let's see. Oh, I'm supposed to say also, please check out San Mateo County Libraries' upcoming author talks at smcl.org/author talks. We would also appreciate it if you could tell us how SMCL did with this program at smcl.org/rate this event. And then besides that, have a great night, everyone. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, everybody. It was such a pleasure to be in dialogue with you, if only through Zoom. And thank you for spending time today. It was a joy. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Good night.